Welcome to the MHC Professional Development Series, focusing on the subject of depression. I am your host, Angela Benedict, CEO of the Military Healing Center. When depression is present, it is a symptom that there is a problem in the frontal cortex of the brain. Depression, insomnia, anxiety, brain fog, fatigue are symptoms, not problems. They are trying to tell us that there are problems that need to be fixed. Historically, depression was treated by making the body absorb antidepressive drugs that try to control neurotransmitters by flooding the brain's pathways with molecular copies of the neurotransmitters, which the brain absorbs, then resists, and response declines. Then the next drug is chosen to do the same thing, which works short-term until the brain resists, then the cycle moves on to the next drug to try to regulate the neurotransmitters. This doesn't work. The neurotransmitters themselves are not the problem. What's causing them to be depleted? Neurotransmitters in our body are chemicals we use to communicate between our brain and the rest of our body. Dopamine, serotonin, GABA, norepinephrine, and epinephrine or adrenaline. Without these, we die. So when these are out of balance, our body treats this like a life-threatening situation and creates an anxiety loop or reaction. Neurotransmitters relay signals between nerve cells called neurons. The brain uses neurotransmitters to tell your heart to beat, your lungs to breathe, your stomach to digest. They also affect mood, sleep, concentration, weight, and can cause adverse symptoms when they are out of balance. Neurotransmitter levels can be depleted in many ways. It is estimated that 86% of North Americans have suboptimal neurotransmitter levels. Stress, poor diet, toxins, genetic predisposition, drugs, both prescription and recreational, alcohol and caffeine usage can cause these levels to be out of optimal range. There are two kinds of neurotransmitters, inhibitory and excitatory. Excitatory neurotransmitters are not necessarily exciting, they are what stimulate the brain. Those that calm the brain and help create balance are called inhibitory. Inhibitory neurotransmitters balance mood and are easily depleted when the excitatory neurotransmitters are overactive. Serotonin is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. Adequate amounts of serotonin are necessary for a stable mood and to balance any excessive excitatory or stimulating neurotransmitter firing in the brain. If you use stimulant medications or caffeine in your daily regime, it can cause a depletion of serotonin over time. GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter that is often referred to as nature's Valium-like substance. When GABA is out of range, too high or low, it is likely that an excitatory neurotransmitter is firing too often in the brain. GABA will be sent out to attempt to balance this overfiring. Dopamine is both excitatory and inhibitory. Dopamine is our main focus neurotransmitter. When dopamine is either elevated or low, we can have focus issues, such as not remembering where we put our keys, forgetting what a paragraph said when we just finished reading it, or simply daydreaming and not being able to stay on task. Dopamine is also responsible for our drive or desire to get things done, motivation. Stimulants and caffeine cause dopamine to be pushed into the synapses so that focus is improved. Unfortunately, stimulating dopamine consistently can cause a depletion of dopamine over time. Norepinephrine is an excitatory neurotransmitter. Norepinephrine helps to make epinephrine as well. This neurotransmitter can cause anxiety at elevated excretion levels. Low levels of norepinephrine are associated with low energy, decreased focus ability, and sleep cycle problems. Epinephrine, or adrenaline, is an excitatory neurotransmitter that is reflective of stress. Long-term stress or insomnia can cause adrenaline levels to be depleted. Adrenaline also regulates heart rate and blood pressure and contributes to blood sugar regulation. Neurodegeneration is any condition that leads to a progressive dysfunction of the nervous systems of the body. This includes brain diseases such as Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, and Alzheimer's disease. Neurodegeneration is caused by blood sugar issues, cortisol, oxygen and circulation issues, inflammation, gut health, including gluten sensitivity. Understanding how much our diet and stress levels contribute to our health or to our disease is critical in order to protect our bodies. All neurodegenerative disorders begin with the symptom of depression, which means there is a decreased firing of the synapses in the frontal area of the brain. Depression will always be paired up with at least one other telltale symptom: depression and insomnia, depression and brain fog, depression and anxiety. Everyone has down days. This is acute depression. Exercise is the best remedy. It floods our bodies with dopamine and endorphins and makes us feel great. Food is the most overused, mistreated, addictive anxiety drug. Exercise is the least used antidepressant, but it is the most effective. Chronic depression is a mechanism malfunction in our brain. The two main sidekicks of depression are anxiety and insomnia. Depression and anxiety is a cortisol issue that could be caused by any of the life-threatening issues the body is facing. The hippocampus of the brain is highly sensitive to excessive cortisol release. It causes atrophy to the brain. Typically, there will also be a GABA pathway issue because there isn't enough GABA to calm the brain. Depression and insomnia is going to be a cortisol, adrenaline, and blood sugar issue. Not enough rest creates brain fatigue. Mental loops where your mind can't shut off creates fatigue. This worrying is anxiety. In extreme cases of insomnia that involves hypervigilance, which many soldiers and first responders suffer from, it is this mental loop that creates the anxiety that leads the body to have serious symptoms. We will learn about hypervigilance during in-class training in the TTSCT course, Tactical Trauma Self-Care Training. What is the issue with insulin? Why is excessive cortisol a problem in our bodies? We need a certain amount of glucose in our bodies at all times. Primarily, only our brain uses glucose, which is sugar. Certain foods have a higher amount of glucose than others, and these can be rated on a glycemic index. It may be surprising what foods contain high levels of glucose. For example, whole wheat bread and oats have high glycemic indexes, higher than table sugar. Glucose is the major source of energy for the body, and it is easily manufactured by the body from sugar and starches. It requires more energy to make glucose from proteins and fats. This is why many people prefer a paleo or ketosis diet that is high in proteins and good fats. Each glucose molecule has to be transported into each cell of the body. Insulin is a transporter molecule that gets the glucose into each cell. Normal healthy cells are highly sensitive or receptive to insulin. Insulin knocks, and the cell lets it enter with the glucose, but each cell can only use so much glucose at a time. Too much glucose triggers a transportation issue, as more insulin is created to carry the glucose to cells who won't take it in. The cells turn off their receptors. Now insulin has nowhere to take all the glucose it has. The pancreas, which creates the insulin, understands that there's a problem but has limited options. It has to create more insulin. This cycle creates type 2 diabetes. The treatment is to change the diet and limit the amount of glucose. When there is too much, the body is flooded by toxic levels of glucose, and this causes inflammation. Insulin is a dominant hormone that determines the levels of other hormones. It works closely with adrenaline and cortisol. The pancreas is part of the endocrine system that reacts to stress responses. When insulin resistance in the cells is occurring, that is a life-threatening situation for the body, and cortisol is released. If the situation doesn't improve quickly, cortisol keeps being released. The siren that there is a problem keeps going off until the problem is fixed. Cortisol in excessive amounts does damage to all cells, especially in the brain. The brain has no pain receptors. Our indicator is inflammation. Our indicator of inflammation in the brain is brain fog, memory loss, thinking problems, neurodegeneration. To save your brain, change your diet and reduce inflammation. In the next video, learn about why widespread inflammation in the body is so destructive and how to prevent and put out this wildfire. Changing your diet to decrease inflammation will protect your brain. It will also improve your mood and operational performance. Thank you for taking the time to attend this training. Please join me again for the next training video in the series on depression, video 2 of 4, Depression and Brain Fog. For all training options, go to the MHC site at militaryhealingcenter.net. Be well, stay safe, and thank you for your service.